I wish Thomas would just disappear, so I could finally be with Daniel forever. The words cut through the quiet Denver afternoon like shattered glass. Evelyn Miller whispered them over the phone, her voice dripping with disdain and longing, never realizing that the man she had dismissed so easily was standing only a few feet away. Thomas Miller, her husband of 20 years, froze in the doorway. His calloused hands, still carrying the scent of motor oil and steel, clenched around his phone. In that split second, instinct took over. He pressed record. Every cruel syllable, every venomous word that spilled from Evelyn's mouth was captured. Her laughter followed, soft and mocking, as if erasing 2 decades of shared life with a single careless wish. For a moment, the world seemed to tilt. The man who had stood by her through hospital nights, through unpaid bills, through the emptiness of infertility, suddenly realized he had become nothing more than an obstacle in her pursuit of another man. The silence that followed was heavier than thunder, and in that silence, Thomas made a choice. Not to confront her immediately, not to beg or plead, but to listen. Because sometimes the most devastating revenge begins not with words, but with patience. Viewers, imagine standing there. What would you do if your spouse wished you out of existence? Would you fight for them, or walk away forever? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more gripping stories like this one. Thomas Miller was not a man of luxury, but of labor. For 20 years, he ran a small auto repair shop on the outskirts of Denver, his hands stained with grease, his back bent from long hours under the hood of engines. To his neighbors, Thomas was dependable, the man who would fix a car late at night or plow snow from an elderly widow's driveway without asking for payment. To Evelyn, his wife, he was once the boy who carried her books in high school, the young man who proposed under the old oak tree where they carved their initials. Thomas's love was steady, almost old-fashioned, built on loyalty, hard work, and quiet devotion. But for Evelyn, that devotion had turned into something suffocating. She was a woman restless with ambition, thriving in the glittering world of real estate, where expensive suits and sharp smiles bought her a taste of power. Each successful deal fueled her hunger for more, the kind of life she believed she deserved, not the modest home and simple dinners Thomas offered. And then came Daniel Foster, a charismatic orthopedic surgeon, tall, perfectly groomed, with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to being admired. At business mixers, he charmed Evelyn effortlessly with polished compliments and subtle touches. To outsiders, he seemed harmless, friendly, professional. But to Evelyn, he was intoxicating, the embodiment of wealth and sophistication. Their secret encounters fed her discontent, making her resent the life she shared with Thomas even more. 2 decades of marriage now stood on a fragile foundation. They had no children. Evelyn's medical complications had closed that door years ago, leaving unspoken grief between them. Thomas had embraced her pain as his own, assuring her that love was enough. But Evelyn saw only emptiness, a void she filled with resentment and dreams of a different future. Beneath the roof of their quiet Denver home, a storm was gathering, a storm that would soon tear apart everything they had built. That Tuesday afternoon, Thomas came home earlier than expected. A client had canceled a repair job last minute, leaving his shop unusually quiet. He thought Evelyn might be in the kitchen, maybe humming along to her favorite jazz playlist while preparing dinner. But instead, he heard her voice drifting from the living room, sharp, cutting, laced with frustration. "I can't stand the smell of grease on him anymore," Evelyn spat into the phone. "Every day it's the same dirty hands, the same old truck. What kind of life is this?" Thomas froze in the hallway. His pulse thundered in his ears as he inched closer, careful not to make a sound. Evelyn's words grew harsher. 20 years, And what do I have to show for it? A modest house, no children, a husband who thinks bringing me takeout is romance. Her laughter followed, brittle and cruel. And then there's Daniel. Do you know what it feels like when he walks into a room? Everyone notices. He takes me to restaurants Thomas could never afford. He makes me feel alive. Thomas's stomach tightened, as though her words were knives twisting inside him. He leaned against the wall, gripping his phone like a lifeline. The memory of nights in the hospital, holding her hand through fertility treatments, flashed before his eyes. The sacrifices, the double shifts, the quiet reassurances, all of it reduced to nothing in her mocking tone. And Thomas? Evelyn sneered. He's like a loyal dog. Always there, always following, but never enough. Not a real man like Daniel. Thomas's chest burned with humiliation. He wanted to storm into the room, to shout, to demand answers, but something inside him told him not to. Not yet. So he stood there in silence, recording every word, every insult, every betrayal. Because silence in that moment was more powerful than rage. That night, Thomas lay awake, staring at the ceiling of their quiet bedroom. Beside him, Evelyn slept soundly, her breathing calm, her face softened by dreams. To anyone else, she looked innocent. But Thomas's mind replayed her words on a cruel loop. He's not a real man like Daniel. Each syllable carved deeper into his chest. The clock ticked past midnight, then 1, then 2. Sleep never came. Instead, memories arrived, shards of their past life, sharp and unrelenting. He saw Evelyn in a hospital gown, eyes red from crying after yet another failed treatment. He remembered holding her through the night, whispering that love was enough, even if children never came. He recalled working double shifts, saving every dollar so she could try one more specialist. He saw the oak tree in their hometown park, initials carved into the bark, where he promised her forever. And now, forever had been reduced to a punchline in her cruel jokes. Thomas's chest ached with something darker than heartbreak. It was betrayal laced with humiliation, devotion answered with scorn. For hours, he wrestled with the question, confront her or walk away. Part of him wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, to beg her to remember the life they'd built. But another voice whispered colder truths. Evelyn had not spoken in anger. She had spoken in certainty. Those words weren't mistakes. They were her wishes. And then, in the stillness of that sleepless night, something hardened inside Thomas. If she wished him gone, then gone he would be. But not in the way she imagined. He would give her exactly what she asked for, only with a twist sharp enough to make her regret every word. No dramatic fights, no tears, no pleading, only silence, precision, and a plan. The man who had spent 2 decades bending himself to her needs finally understood. The greatest revenge wasn't shouting in her face. It was granting her wish so completely that her own fantasy destroyed her. Thomas closed his eyes as dawn crept through the blinds. His heart was no longer breaking. It was calculating. The next morning, Thomas brewed Evelyn's coffee exactly the way she liked it. 2 sugars, a splash of almond milk, extra hot. He carried it upstairs on a small tray, placing a folded note beside the cup. Have a wonderful day, love. Evelyn smiled faintly, mistaking his tenderness for surrender. For the next 3 weeks, Thomas perfected the role of the doting husband. He kissed her goodbye at the door, slipped little messages into her yoga bag, and asked about her day with genuine curiosity. On the surface, nothing seemed wrong. But beneath that calm exterior, every gesture was calculated. Because behind his steady smile, Thomas was laying the groundwork for the most precise act of revenge he had ever imagined. His first call was to his brother, Matthew, a discreet attorney in Dallas. Matt, I need divorce papers drawn up fast and airtight, and I've got evidence Matthew didn't ask why. The Miller brothers had always covered for each other. Within days, the paperwork was prepared, waiting only for Thomas's signature. His second call was to a trusted banker he'd known since childhood. A new account was opened under his name only, quiet and untraceable. Funds began to trickle in as Thomas transferred money from joint accounts, careful not to raise suspicion. Every deposit, every transaction, was another brick in the fortress he was building. But the true genius lay in the evidence. Each night, when Evelyn returned from her so-called yoga retreats, Thomas documented everything. The diamond bracelet Daniel had given her, the perfume still clinging to her clothes, the lies about wellness seminars that never existed, photographs, receipts, timestamps. He gathered them all, creating a file so damning it could cut through any courtroom defense. And still, Evelyn floated through the house like a woman already free. She hummed while cooking dinner, smiled when Daniel's texts lit up her phone, and even initiated intimacy, believing Thomas was too blind to see. But Thomas saw everything. Every kiss she gave, every lie she told, only sharpened his focus. The higher she built her fantasy, the further she would fall. And the audience of this silent play, Thomas alone, knew the curtain was about to drop. The stage was set, the players were in motion, and the climax of his carefully crafted revenge drew closer with every passing day. The gray Thursday morning arrived with drizzle streaking down the windows. Evelyn hummed upstairs as she dressed for another advanced yoga workshop, unaware that her world was about to collapse. Thomas sat at the kitchen table, sipping black coffee, his gaze sweeping over every corner of the home he had built with his own hands. Every beam, every shelf, every detail of this house carried his fingerprint. And today, it would no longer be his. At 10:15 a.m., Thomas signed the final closing papers in a quiet downtown office. The buyer, a tech executive from Seattle, shook his hand, eager to move in immediately. The funds, hundreds of thousands, were wired into Thomas's private account within minutes. It was done. By noon, the house was no longer theirs. It was his no more, and soon, hers no longer. Thomas drove back, parked the old pickup in the driveway one last time, and carried out 12 boxes. Inside them were only essentials: his tools, family photo albums, his grandfather's pocket knife, and a single flannel jacket Evelyn always hated. The rest, the furniture, the memories, the life, they would stay behind, like a museum of betrayal. In the center of the spotless kitchen counter, Thomas placed a manila envelope. Inside, signed divorce papers, notarized and final. A flash drive containing every cruel word Evelyn had spoken, and a handwritten note in his steady hand. You wished me gone. Consider your wish granted. For a long moment he stood there, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the faint patter of rain. It was the sound of an ending. Then he turned the key, stepped outside, and closed the door without looking back. At 2:30 p.m., Thomas's old pickup rumbled out of Denver, taillights swallowed by mist. No shouting, no confrontation, no explanations. Just silence. Sharp, final, and devastating. To Evelyn it would feel like magic, her wish granted overnight. But to Thomas, it was liberation. Every mile that pulled him farther from the city lifted the weight from his chest. For the first time in years, he could breathe without her shadow looming over him. Denver faded in the rearview mirror, and ahead stretched Wyoming's wide, empty roads. A new life waited, clean and untainted. Thomas had vanished, exactly as she had dreamed, but not for her freedom, for his own. At 7:30 that evening, Evelyn returned home, rain still clinging to her coat. She tossed her keys on the counter, humming, distracted by Daniel's text. Can't wait for this weekend. But the house felt different, quieter. colder. She didn't notice the envelope at first. She reheated leftover pasta, poured herself a glass of wine, and only when she reached for a bottle of water did her eyes fall on the manila folder with her name written in Thomas's steady handwriting. Curious, she opened it casually, expecting some sentimental letter. But what tumbled out stopped her heart. Divorce papers, a notarized signature, and a flash drive. Her hands trembled as she plugged it into her laptop. Seconds later, her own voice filled the kitchen. "He's like a loyal dog. Not a real man. I wish he'd disappear." The cruel certainty in her tone was undeniable. Hearing herself betray 2 decades of marriage made her knees buckle. Tears blurred her vision as she read the handwritten note. "You wished me gone. Consider your wish granted." A knock rattled the front door before she could recover. 2 strangers stood outside, well-dressed, holding official documents. "Mrs. Miller? We're the new owners of this property. The sale closed this morning. You have 24 hours to vacate." Evelyn's jaw dropped. "This is my house. There must be a mistake." But the paperwork was ironclad. The deed had been in Thomas's name long before their marriage. Legally, she had no claim. The strangers left, apologetic but firm, leaving Evelyn trembling in the doorway of a home that was no longer hers. Panic surged. She called her sister. "Rebecca, I need a place to stay. Thomas has lost his mind." But her sister's voice was cold. "We don't have room. And honestly, Eve, you made your choices. Good luck, click." Evelyn tried a friend from yoga. "Sarah, please, you know what I'm going through." "I'm sorry, Evelyn. I don't want to get involved in your marriage drama." Click. Desperate, she dialed Daniel. "Daniel, something terrible has happened. Thomas found out about us. I need you." His tone was ice. "Evelyn, let's be clear. This was never serious. I have a wife and children. I'm not risking my life for you." "But you said—" "I said what you wanted to hear. Don't call me again." The line went dead. Her wine glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the tile. Everything she had built, every fantasy she had clung to, crumbled in a single night. No husband, no lover, no friends, no family support. Just the echo of her own betrayal playing back in her head, a curse she had spoken into existence. Evelyn sank to the cold kitchen floor, sobbing, clutching the papers that sealed her ruin. Her wish had come true, but instead of freedom, she was left with nothing. Absolutely nothing. By the time Evelyn was crumbling in Denver, Thomas was already 200 miles north, crossing into Wyoming. The wide-open roads stretched endlessly before him, a canvas of freedom he had not felt in years. He rented a small cabin outside a quiet town called Sheridan. Nothing fancy, just 4 clean walls, a tin roof, and the promise of silence. In the shed behind it, Thomas unpacked his tools and began shaping wood and metal once again. The rhythm of his craft returned, steady and grounding. Word spread quickly. The locals discovered that the quiet newcomer was not just a mechanic, but a craftsman. He built sturdy tables, chairs that never wobbled, and farm equipment that lasted longer than anything store-bought. Soon, orders piled up. A rancher commissioned a new barn door. A restaurant owner requested hand-carved booths. Checks came in, larger than any pay he had seen back in Denver. For the first time, Thomas set his own prices, and people paid without complaint. But it wasn't only business that began to change his life. At the town library, he met Linda Parker, a widow in her 40s with warm eyes and a gentle laugh. She noticed the calluses on his hands, the quiet patience in his voice, and she didn't see him as less than. She saw him. They started with coffee, long conversations that stretched into evenings. Linda didn't demand diamonds or status. She appreciated small things, like the way Thomas brewed coffee strong enough to cut the morning chill, or how he remembered her favorite novels. With her, Thomas rediscovered what it meant to be valued, not used. Nights in Sheridan were quiet, filled with crickets and distant coyotes instead of Evelyn's sighs of discontent. In the mornings, sunlight streamed through the cabin window, and for the first time in decades, Thomas woke without a weight on his chest. Meanwhile, miles away, Evelyn's world shrank to a motel room, her once polished reputation reduced to whispers and pity. She scrolled through her phone in silence, while Thomas hammered new beams into place, laughter echoing with the townsfolk who respected him. The contrast was brutal. One life decayed, the other flourished. And Thomas knew, deep down, that the greatest revenge had already unfolded. Not in court, not in screams, but in the quiet dignity of rebuilding a better life. In the end, Thomas's greatest act of revenge was not destroying Evelyn, it was rebuilding himself. He proved that loyalty and devotion, when mocked and discarded, could transform into strength and independence. True justice was not in the courtroom, but in the quiet dignity of living a better life. Evelyn was left with emptiness, the echo of her own betrayal, while Thomas found peace, respect, and love that was real. Sometimes, the most powerful revenge is not shouting, not fighting, but simply becoming someone they will never have access to again. Viewers, if you discovered your spouse betrayed you after 20 years, would you expose them publicly, or walk away silently like Thomas? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more gripping stories.